Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of your Women in Gender Studies course. I'm your professor, Dr. Maldonado. Let's get started. So we'll be examining Black women loving women's sociosexual narratives. And what we mean by Black women loving women's sociosexual narratives is that these are the stories and narratives told by Black women who love and make love with other Black women, despite their sexual identity. Because as we know by this point in the semester, there are many sexual identities that you can choose from and identify as. However, the core similarity when it comes to those sexual identities with this particular demographic is that they all have a love for Black women. So I'm going to share with you my pre-defense colloquy or research talk or research colloquium that I did back in 2023 as a graduate student, PhD level at Indiana University. Now, this colloquy research talk was a couple of months before my actual defense, so I'm excited to share this history with you and to also illustrate to you what it looks like at the PhD level before defending, just to give you all that confidence that you too can do it too when it comes to implementing your own original research.
All right, now we're set to go. So, hello everyone. Again, my name is Jessamy Maldonado. My project is centers Black women, loving women's sociosexual narratives. So, on the docket for today, I want to go over the introduction for me as a researcher, my project, the methodology for the project, research graphics, findings, and the conclusion. So, to introduce myself, again, my name is Jessamy Maldonado. And my research chair is Dr. Colleen Johnson, and my research team consists of Doctors Amrita Myers, Sarah Friedman, Marvin Sterling, and William Yarber. My research project is informed by multiple academic backgrounds, making it inherently interdisciplinary. So my research interests were already covered. So I've been interested in sex research due to being inspired by the pioneering research by Alfred Kinsey and a team of masters in Johnson, where they collected data on sexual behaviors and the physiology of sex respectively. So I've always been imagined doing something like that in my career. And after becoming interested in LGBTQ plus studies, I wanted to merge these interests together. So that automatically resulted in studying Black queer social sexual behavior. So when I first started looking into the social science behind Black queer women, as an undergrad, I noticed there were only 10 to 15 published articles outside of the lens of destitution when it comes to studying Black social sexuality. Everything else is focused on primarily on loss, disease, death, displacement, HIV/AIDS. And although these are really severe and prevalent issues within underserved communities do not overlap. It's not synonymous with Black communities. These are social conditions, right, that many communities face. These are not the life stories of Black queer people. So there is love, there is passion, there is community, friendships, relationships, exploratory sexualities, and other regular and positive things pertinent to Black life outside of destitution. So I wanted to make sure that I intentionally created a study that examined those tenets of Black social sexual life as these same tenets are examined in white social sexual cultural studies. So I use the word queer with a K, Kweer, instead of queer with a Queer, since the latter is historically associated with white people's identity politics and also resistance against heteronormativity, whereas the former was created by Sharif Williams to specifically address Black people's identity politics and resistance against heteronormativity. And I chose Atlanta to conduct my ethnography because it's known as the Black gay Mecca of the United States. However, most of the literature conducted on Black social sexuality in Atlanta primarily centers down low, Black men or gay Black men. Down low Black men are men who have sex with men but present and identify as heterosexual without disclosing their same gender or sexual partners to anyone. So, and also that mostly comes from the ongoing and pervasive HIV/AIDS epidemic within the city proper of Atlanta. And again, these issues are important to investigate. However, since Atlanta is known as the Black gay Mecca, I found it really interesting and saddening that there is literally no research on Black lesbians, on Black women loving women in Atlanta. So my research is the first, literally the first, to examine Black women's social sexual lives within the city of Atlanta. So that goes into the introduction of my project, where I examine how unique iterations of Blackness shape Black women loving women's gender and sexuality. And my specific research questions are, how do Black women's cultural ideologies translate into co-constitutive ethnic, gender, and sexual identities? And how Black women's cultural ideologies translate into sartorial, stylistic, and sexual behaviors that are uniquely Black. So in other words, I examine how Black women loving women transform unmarked place into Black queer space through their social sexual performances. And then I examine the possible connections between gendered sexual identities and choice of romantic and sexual partners. And lastly, I examine the sexual behaviors that Black women perform with their partners. So the importance of this project, again, is to examine the intersectional dynamics as it pertains to cultural performance. So without these social science projects to examine these things, we wouldn't be able to restructure systems that need to consider the unique needs of communities, of understudied communities, such as Black, lesbian communities, and et cetera. There are multiple ways of being and knowing, right? And so that are not part of the mainstream. So those ways of being and knowing and performativities and identity politics need to be considered and examined. So here's some previous research, foundational cornerstones of Black women loving women. The first batch examines Black lesbian communities' expectations of gender roles, sexual behavior, and family formation among masculine presenting Black lesbians. And it found that there is this stigma against masculine presenting Black lesbians where they're expected to perform hegemonic masculinity, right? Dominant forms, dominant understandings of masculinity, and there's no room for femininity at all within their gender performance or even their gender roles when it comes to caretaking for their families and also childbearing and child raising as well. And the second batch of articles examines gender labels and gender roles within Black lesbian communities in Los Angeles and Chicago, respectively, and found similar findings when it comes to gender label usage, such as femme, stud, and STEM. Now, femme stands for feminine presenting in terms of appearance, stud stands for masculine presenting in terms of appearance, and STEM/gender blender stands for those who have androgynous gender presenting styles, right? And so the last batch of articles that examines the division of household labor and familial responsibilities among Black same gender female couples as well, and found that motherhood is an epitome of Black lesbian social sexual life. And although both partners are expected to hold egalitarian views and roles, especially when it comes to finances, there is a division of household labor when it comes to the chores. The one who bears the children, and that's going to be the one who presents as feminine, because there's a huge stigma against a pregnant stud. Lord forbid a masculine presenting woman becomes pregnant, because that is evidence that she had sex with a man or took sperm, and that goes against these internalized heterosexist and internalized homophobic beliefs when it comes to masculine presenting lesbian women. So we'll get into that a bit later with my study. So the methodology of my study includes an Afrocentric feminist paradigm. So Afrocentricity, that prioritizes and centers the voices of African diasporic peoples. Of course, feminist studies prioritize and centers the experiences of women. So combine that together for an Afrocentric feminist paradigm, it examines the African diasporic women's experiential knowledge. And that's what this study is exactly designed to do. So I have a multi-methodological approach here where I incorporate ethnography and qualitative interviewing into the study, where these two methods not only overlap, but they also perform two separate legs of the study as well. So with ethnography, I engage in observation and participation in Atlanta, Georgia. And I also engage in unstructured interviewing with those in the research site where I have generate spontaneous impromptu questions about cultural performativity, and also where to find other sites in which to observe and participate with other Black lesbians within Atlanta, Georgia. And for interviewing, that's a separate leg of my study where I conduct a transnational sample of transnational recruitment of Black women loving women around the globe, where I conduct it either through Zoom video conferencing interviews or Qualtrics online surveys. And my positionality here to situate myself within the research, I'm a fellow Black woman who dates Black women. So I have the sociosexual background and experience to seamlessly participate within these communities, engage in dialogical performance, or what is known as interactive conversations with women, and understand the core foundation of their cultural performances. So with this positionality, I don't claim to know everything about my research site or my participants, but I do claim to have the insider status, the majority of insider status with Black women to integrate more easily within my intended research field without much resistance as a person who wouldn't share the similar gender, ethnic, and sexual identities. So I will say that being a Northerner conducting ethnography in the South, a lot of Southerners can smell my regional foreignness from 10,000 miles away. So they immediately look me up and down. A lot of women in this site and say, "You're not from here, are you?" I said, we can tell. So I'm still like parsing that out when it comes to my dissertation. So that was a challenge, and let's go forward. So research demographics, these are estimations from, oh, I'm not there yet. So my research participants, I've had mostly 3 field contacts, 2 queer Black women and 1 queer Black man who led me to different sites to observe Black lesbians and also their cultural performances. Again, my research site was Atlanta, Georgia, and the time I split 8 weeks in between May 2021 to September 2021. And I did this strategically to optimize my time spent in Atlanta. And this was partly due to allocate financial resources strategically and to also attend scheduled Black queer events throughout the summer to attend those events while also attending non-events of sociality for Black women loving women outside of those parameters of the events. And for interview participants, I invited 316 folks to participate. 142 completed the study. So specifically, 58 completed video interviews and 84 completed survey interviews. And my research site for these semi-structured interviews was dating websites and also social media platforms. And that time that I allocated to the interviews overlapped, as you see, April 2021 to September 2021, it overlapped with my ethnography. And I would suggest not to overlap 2 methods because it definitely resulted in a jam-packed schedule where I had 2 to 3 interviews booked per day, besides on the weekend, so I can dedicate to my ethnography in Atlanta. And it got done, but it was a lot. So I wouldn't suggest overlapping methods. Definitely parse it out so you can have time dedicated equally to each venture. So going forward, you'll see the social media websites and dating websites that I used. So there are 2 things demonstrated on this slide. On the left, it shows the totality of dating and social media platforms I use to recruit individuals for semi-structured interviewing of my study. And again, semi-structured interviewing is having a predetermined list of questions that you ask open-ended questions and you go participants open-ended questions and you the direction of the interview goes into multiple directions depending upon their answers. So on the right side is a screenshot of the dating profile that I had on one mobile app called BLK, stands for Black, mostly Black people on there looking for other Black people to date. And this was a prompt that I had, example prompt that I had for the dating profile. And yeah, and also a flyer too that I had as one of my pictures for the study, right? So back to the chart. It's organized based on the highest number of solicited individuals and then decreases in value from there. The gray markers indicate the number of invited participants. The orange markers indicate the number of those who completed the video interviews, and the blue markers indicate the number of those who completed the surveys. So as you see, for dating websites, I use Tinder, BLK, Her, Hinge, Plenty of Fish, and OKC. And then for social media websites, I use Facebook, Instagram, GroupMe, and Reddit. I also use email referrals from participants who advertise my study through their respective organizations and institutions. And also, Facebook and Tinder were the highest generative sources to recruit participants from. So Facebook was really good to me, and then Tinder was second in place. So this shows that dating websites and social media platforms offer rich sites for possible participants. So I definitely highly recommend as well. So participant demographics within my ethnographic site, these are estimations. So I didn't ask folks how they identified in the field, just not to stand out too much than I already was. So I saw that most of my participants were phenotypically Black women. In the class, it was mixed. So, and I say mixed social economic class because due to the fees required to enter establishments, so the average fee to enter events was $40, with the lowest fee being $10 for a lesbian nightclub and the highest fee being $70 to access a Black lesbian party. So these spaces structurally excluded, for the most part, poor and working class individuals from accessing their space due to the average price that it took to enter the space. That doesn't include parking, food, or drinks. As for interview participants, 100% identified as Black. Class was not asked. However, they gave me careers instead of what they were working in. And examples include several different industries, such as tenured professors, center directors, business owners, entrepreneurs, government officials, machine operators, graduate assistants, administrative personnel, retail clerks, parental homemakers, and etc. And one retired person as well. So you can see I have appendices that shows all these demographics by rundown. I got those at the end of the presentation just in case anyone was interested in seeing charts and graphs. But as you see, most identified as cisgender women, over 40% identified as lesbian, with several other sexual identities that they can identify as. Over 90% identified as American, so they're from the United States. The rest of the 10% was all around the globe. This is a highly college educated sample as well. Most participants had their bachelor's degrees. Second in line was associates, third in line was master's, and fourth in line was doctorate holders. Most of these participants were single and also had no children. Only 34%, roughly 34% had children. And this contrasts to most other Black women loving women studies where most of the samples tend to be married and have children as well. So this transnational sample definitely differs from these location-specific studies within the United States. So let's get to the findings, fun stuff. So I situated my ethnography in mostly the lesbian bar known as My Sister's Room, AKA MSR. Now, My Sister's Room is boasted as one of the longest running lesbian bars in the South and was the central location of my ethnography. So it's owned by a white masculine presenting lesbian. And she is really cool. She was part of my praxis. So let me just go over the demographics here. So the fee to enter after 10 p.m. is $10, but it's free beforehand. Mostly all drinks are under $10, and the food is around the same price too, $10, $12 as well. So visiting the establishment and enjoying what it has to offer is accessible to mostly all social economic levels as well. And the bar owner makes the space intentionally inclusive for all identities, even those with physical disabilities, since she installed a ramp several years ago to make sure folks with physical mobile issues can access the bar. And so compared to other venues in Atlanta, Black catered events are not rare one-off occasions. She regularly procures Black entertainers, such as comedians, drag shows, singers, strip shows that feature Black talent. So as you see in this flyer, which is called Flavor Femme Fridays, you're just going to see mostly Black individuals here. So this is unfortunate, but an interesting finding. Whoever is advertised on the flyers that's going to draw the exact same clientele. So if it's mostly Black people on the flyers, that's who's going to come patronize that event every night. And she throws events every night, themed events every night. So if it's mostly white folks on the flyers, it's going to be a predominantly white crowd. If it's mostly Latin folks on the flyers, it's going to be a mostly Latin. So it's segregated, unfortunately, because it's supposed to be diverse and have clientele look at talent of all identities, but it definitely does result in a segregated audience at MSR. So there's also an upper level, bottom level demographic dynamic as well, where the upper level that's viewable from the outside windows, it features a dance floor, a bar, an elevated DJ booth, right? But it has the upper level is more of a respectable cover where people sat at tables, smoked their hookah, sung karaoke, drunk their drinks. But on the bottom level, down in the basement, it's darker lighting, it's a wider dance floor, there's an elevated stage, and there's also a bar in the area as well with a backyard space too, with a deck. And everyone's down there dancing salaciously. It's really erotic. Folks with more salacious clothing go down to the basement to dance with their lovers or their friends. It's definitely a hypersexual underground down in the basement. And I found this particularly important because the basement offers this protective cover for what really goes on at MSR compared to the upper floor, which shows, oh, there's people having a drink, smoking hookah, da da da. So the top floor offers this protective cover. And it mimics the setup of Black lesbian house parties in the early to mid 1900s, where they will have these salacious parties with one another at night, but in the daytime, just walking around. No one knows about their taboo sexual identity and activities, da 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 da. So MSR really does mimic that structure. And it also enlivens the idea of the culture of respectability politics that encourage, which is a cultural intergenerational philosophy that encourages Black women to always have a reputation of being sexually chaste and conservative to thwart off those accusations of hypersexuality and sexual stereotypes as well. So again, you see that with that upper level where it has this cover, this facade, but the lower level, it's where all the freaks come out to play. The freaks come out at night. It's a whole different universe on the bottom level. So we see that in living at MSR. So this is not surprising, but heteronormativity persists and exists and is pervasive through Black women loving women's relationship dynamics. So I found that there were age differences here though, okay? So younger Black women loving women were more likely to dispel and reject the use of gender labels, whereas older Black women loving women, 40 and up, especially, yes, 40 and up, especially 50 and up, older Black women were more likely to use them. So for younger Black women, they intentionally engage in praxis or social change by destabilizing the system of heteronormativity through denouncing heteronormative gender label terms, such as femme, stud, androgynous, etc., and also in their gender presentation as well. So they are well-versed, younger Black lesbians are well-versed in these overarching systems of oppression that we regularly examine in the field of gender studies. So they apply this theory to action with verbally denouncing these labels. So Black women, on the other hand, older Black women, on the other hand, abide by these labels and still present in heteronormative means. And I attribute this generational difference to the side effects of the second wave feminist movement in the 1970s, where many white lesbians tried to get all lesbians of all demographics to denounce heteronormative gender labeling and performativity, but Black women weren't having it. Black women were like, I own my body. This is bodily autonomy. I own my self-naming. There is power in self-definition. I'm going to identify and present as what I want to. So that's definitely the side effects of older Black women 40 and up still using these labels, gender labels, and the performativity that goes along with it, right? So again, there's also a gay dichotomy in heterosexism, when it comes to this taboo against two studs being together. Okay. So there is this taboo of two studs being together because these are masculine presenting women. Okay. And because they're already gay and masculine presenting, it's considered double gay or gay for two masculine presenting women to be attracted to one another, have sex, and be in a relationship. So it's akin to the heterosexual community putting more stigmatizing weight on two men being together more so than two women being together, right? So it's similar in the Black lesbian community where no one bats an eye at femme relationships, two feminine presenting women being together, because there's this whole issue with invisibility within femmes as well, right? And so with two masculine presenting women being together, to be gay is already stigmatized in the heterosexual community. But to be double gay or gay, that's when that action activates the internalized heterosexism and homophobia within Black lesbians, right? To the point where they even have a name for studs who prefer to date other studs, which is S4S, stud for stud, which is akin to the DL nomer for identifier for Black men who have sex with other men without identifying as gay or they keep it on the low, etc. Right? So this ideology reveals how participants of whatever gender presentation are constructing womanhood as inherently feminine. So they figure that these women have an interest in women. So why are they going after fellow masculine presenting women instead of feminine presenting women? And so this reveals how Black women loving women in this sample construct womanhood as inherently feminine. So they're confused as to why studs are attracted to other studs who embody and present iterations of hegemonic masculinity. Hence the heterosexist term of gay, or being too gay, right? So which being too gay in this sample is considered bad or unacceptable queerness. So let's go forward. Here's some examples, anecdotes from my sample. So Tammy says, I really don't understand how two butches go together. I don't know what that's about. It's not my thing. I don't understand it because they both have masculine energy and they both want the same thing. So I don't understand it. I have nothing against it. You both have the same thing. So how are you being pleased? I don't understand what the give and take is. Again, no different from women of whatever gender presentation being together, but there's this huge confusion with two masculine presenting women being together. But this is not representative of the entire sample. There are caveats here. So Alchemy says, I think we get bogged down by the labels, but I also think that the structures around the labels of man or masculine, feminine, are so strong on Black women that it's like we feel all this stuff about two masculine presenting women. You see stud on stud and how bad it is. But femme, we don't hear anything because there's so much negativity in the way that we understand masculinity. It's so narrative and it's so, negative and it's so narrow that we don't even allow female-bodied, masculine identifying people to be themselves. You say, oh, there's so much masculinity, you must put a feminine person in there, but they have both. Just because they present masculine doesn't mean that they don't have feminine energy. And also, why are you trying to police what they do with their bodies? That's what they're like doing. So there are definitely acknowledgements of this bias and questioning, checking oneself of the bias as well. So when it comes to the relevance to the field of gender studies and the praxis of it, this notion of gay, or being double gay is important because it highlights how even queer communities can appropriate and perpetuate internalized heterosexism and internalized homophobia, and also exposes a queered, ethnicized, and gendered lens of how Black women construct and interpret intersectional considerations of gender and sexuality, specifically how they construct and theoretically enforce the boundaries around masculinity in queer women. So this shows how heteronormativity is invasive, not only just in the cisgender heterosexual community, but also in queer communities as well. So my second set of findings is different styles of Black queer sociability. Okay? So there are age/generational differences in how Black lesbians execute personal style in terms of fashion, right? So considering that Atlanta is the materialistic capital of the South, Younger Black women invest largely in their ability to procure expensive designer luxury fashion and then to advertise their access to their financial excess, both in person and online. Whereas older Black women invest more into the styling of the clothes, regardless of labels on their body. So as long as the clothes fit well and look good on their bodies, fit their curves, accentuate what they want to accentuate and advertise. That's what matters more so than big bunky labels, such as see, that's how you know I don't wear labels, such as was Coco Chanel and Hermes and all that other stuff. So yes, so these differences show that temporary money is loud and established money is quiet. So although different in approach, both generations show their participation in Atlanta's material culture through fashion. So going forward here, there are also age generational differences between functions of social ability, what these social acts do for these women. So younger Black women gather in large groups and advertise their sociability online via social media. So they stand around in these large groups that they come to the events with or meet other people with, and they record themselves laughing, having fun, but once to record and post it online. But once the fun is stopped, they don't even talk to or look at each other anymore for the rest of the night. That's it. They either disperse or sit on the VIP sections just looking at their phone and scrolling at their phone. And entertainment just serves as a backdrop. Whereas older Black women, they attend events either individually or with one other person and make intentional efforts to engage with one another and interact with the offered entertainment. So older Black women attend events to build and strengthen bonds, whereas younger Black women attend events to advertise pre-existing bonds online. So there's also a transformation through doing these things. There's also a transformation of generic place into Black queer space. So through advertising online, younger Black women turn these places into spaces of advertised fashion shows, whereas older Black women transform these places into spaces for family-like reunions where people actually speak to one another, dance with one another, and express queer vulnerabilities of one another, like girl talk in the bathroom or asking other women to dance on the dance floor. Okay. So and this depends on whether the event is held at night or in the daytime as well. So these findings are important that they demonstrate that Black women not only have access, Black women loving women, not only have access to financial access, but they also have culture-specific iterations of how they perform queer sociability in homosocial spaces. So this study contributes contextual data to LGBT studies scholarship that demonstrates how Black queer women operate within, transform, and occupy space in Atlanta's gay social scene. These findings also demonstrate how one's identity, such as age, impacts and influences the performances of other identities as well, right? So going forward, also I have findings in bodily autonomy. So Black women's control of their sexual health practices, kink, BDSM, and erotic power. So Black women have a lack of barrier use when it comes to their sexual behaviors with other Black women. So because there is a low transmission rate of STIs and HIV/AIDS between women, that justifies a lot of Black women's non-use of prophylaxis measures. And I will say this, low risk does not equate to no risk. So there definitely should be use of prophylaxis when it comes to sexual behaviors between women. So instead of using prophylaxis, Black women actually engage in preliminary testing before having unprotected sex. And they also have pre-intercourse conversations about sexual histories and sexual partners. Have you ever been diagnosed with an STI or HIV/AIDS? Those things. And there's this big psychological association with the penis as illness paradigm. So because the riskiest sexual behaviors involve anal and penile vaginal intercourse, a lot of the associated risks when it comes to women's same gender sexual behaviors goes out the window. Okay. And there's also a sex toy replacement ideology per new relationship. Black women loving women are very, very particular about maintaining sexual hygiene more so than using barriers for STI transmission. So there's this huge belief among most of the participants in my sample that you must replace expensive sex toys with every new partner. No questions asked, okay? At the very least, you must use a condom on any and all phallic type of toys as well. But the preference is to replace sex toys with each and every partner to prevent any type of bacteria transfer, regardless of how thoroughly or how often you wash these toys. So this is just a chart assessing the quantitative data of participants who I asked, have you ever used barrier methods? And have you ever required partners to be tested for STIs, HIV, AIDS? And as you see, an overwhelming majority of averaging 60% of participants in their 20s, 30s, and 40s claim to have unprotected sex. However, they do require participants to either have testing or to have those preliminary conversations about it. But most of participants do not use, as you see by the green figures, no protection. So these findings are congruent with the current literature that suggests that women in general who have same gender sex forego using barrier methods. And this is important to consider because this needs to be more persuasive discourse when it comes to women's annual exams and checkups as well for STI testing and regular barrier use and access to those prophylaxis measures. So that's why these findings are important to show that women are still not using barrier methods when it comes to same gender sexual relations. So that's very important. Going on. So when it comes to kink and BDSM, a lot of Black women in my sample are against BDSM, which stands for bondage, domination, submission, sadomasochism. They associate BDSM with unnecessary pain in the sexual arena. A lot of Black women associate the sexual arena with pleasure and gentleness. So engaging in BDSM would be the antithesis of that. However, many are open to kink behaviors, like biting or scratching, things like that. So there are some examples here from Marie. Marie says, I don't like where kink and BDSM takes me. It's a little too violent for me. Issues around violence, so I'm good. I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to control anybody. Don't hit me, leather chaps, I'm good. Now, regular old sex is fine. If you can't figure out what to do with that, then you might not be doing it. And Las, on the other hand, to represent the other end of the spectrum, says, I'm very much a part of the BDSM lifestyle. I'm fully a part of the lifestyle. So I might as well be a mentor at this point because I've been a lifestyle for a while now. So in New Orleans mixes voodoo and BDSM. So New Orleans kink lifestyle is big, like Black kink. When I think about freedom, I think about the freedom to explore and making sure that I'm creating environments where people can explore. I love when people are like, I've never done this before, I have questions. Oh, ask me all the questions you want because I have a list of experiences. I have a very long resume of things I've tried, things I would try again, and things I don't like. So Shalaz's anecdote represents only one of two Black women in the sample who openly is for BDSM out of 142 women who took the video interviews and survey interviews. So it's definitely reflective as well as respectability politics because it reveals Black women's sexual vulnerabilities and anxieties about sexual behaviors associated with pain and willful exploitation. So although they may be willingly extend certain sexual limits and interests, they're not willing to reestablish sexual boundaries when it comes to BDSM, okay? And so just wanted to make sure to also reiterate these findings are important because they live in Black women's negotiation with respectability politics and reserving bodily control over their bodies, right? So going forward, there is also manifestation of sexual and non-sexual goals via idiosyncratic iterations of erotic power. So again, Audre Lorde articulates that erotic power is one's inner consciousness or knowledge of the self. That's where your strength lies. That's who you are and what you contribute to the world. So Black women loving women in this study execute their erotic power in various ways to accomplish both sexual and non-sexual goals. And that's through BDSM practices, courtship pursuits, sexual agency, and a love of self. So one of my participants mentioned sex magic, whereas you bring goals into fruition through calling out what you want to be accomplished. So at the peak of orgasm, you're supposed to call out what you want to accomplish, such as, I want my ex back, or I want this job promotion, or I need a bigger salary by 2024. Like, you literally say that at the peak of orgasm, because orgasm is a social, it brings you into this plane in between the real world in the spiritual world, and orgasm is right there. It brings you right in the middle between this real world and spiritual world. So you're supposed to use that orgasm to bring into fruition sexual or non-sexual goals, okay? Even to finish your dissertation on time, right? So that's a sexual goal as well. So one of the anecdotes that I captured from Spice is pretty long, so I will probably shorten it. When it says, she basically summarizes that a lot of Black women don't know their erotic power. So when they do, it exudes off of her. Her power radiates from her essence, from her being. And that is powerful. A lot of folks don't know their erotic power or are afraid to tap into it. So when you do, it's foundational and it does something for you. And so these findings are important because they illustrate specific ways in which Black women loving women understand and construct self-love, interpersonal love, and the deeper meanings behind sexual behaviors. And since the field of gender studies is predicated upon how we construct these social systems and quotidian phenomena, understanding these intersectional constructions inform and influence our pre-existing knowledge about what love looks like, sounds like, and what specific sex acts mean to diverse individuals and communities. Okay? And so when it comes to the last portion of findings, I found that there were intra-connected silos among identity, relationship formation, and sexual behavior. So that doesn't mean that identity, relationship formation, and sexual behavior are connected. I did not find any interconnections between these three constructs. However, I found intra-connections within identity, within relationship formation, within sexual behavior. So a lot of Black women acknowledge and recognize their queer interests in childhood. But before identifying as queer, as some iteration of queer, they instead act on it in childhood with performing sex acts with similar age peers. And that can either be consensual or coercive. But most of my sample get claims that their sex acts were consensual. And I'll give examples of both. And also sexual behaviors. There's an ethics of porn production that Black women predicate their arousal upon. And there's also this placing of eroticization within the taboo of masculine men's same gender sex. So let's get to that. So with sexual behavior for childhood, Jan articulates how she took her same gender friend's virginity at 15 because her friend didn't want a man to dirty her through taking her virginity. So she figured that since a woman was not considered dirty through sex, that if she has sex with a woman, she still maintains her morality and cleanliness by having sex with a woman versus having sex with a man. And so this demonstrates how Black women often queer and transform all different types of non-romantic relationships to perform specific functions, right? So it just portrays the fluidity of relationships as well. This is not a friends with benefits sort of situation. It was a trusted relationship, a trusted friendship where they performed a function to accomplish a specific goal, and they were thankful and went about their different ways. So going on the other hand, sexual behaviors in childhood can also be coercive as well, where Bunny articulates how her stepsisters and cousins would perform sex acts on her when she was a very young child and would coerce Bunny to perform sex acts on other similar aged children as well. But she never construed it in her mind as abuse, so she went along in life, to her knowledge, unfazed, at least explicitly known unfazed, but there's a clear example, of course, sex acts. And these findings are important because they demonstrate how early queer sexuality can be identified in childhood, but they also act on it on full-blown intercourse as well. So precautions should be in place for early sex education and safe sex measures as well. So the last thing that I want to talk to you about is sexual behaviors. So a lot of Black women in my sample, they consume varying types of pornography. So at the top, as you see, mostly Black lesbian porn, but a close second is gay men's, okay? And so let's go into what this means. So with the ethics of porn production, a lot of Black women situate their eroticism in the ethics of porn. Are the Black women dressed well? Are their backgrounds, do their backgrounds not look sketchy, etc.? So let's give an example from Alex. I have an issue with the porn industry just because when you click on a video and it's white, they always have the nice stuff. It's always in a nice home. They look better. They look more taken care of. But when it comes to ebony or Black adult actresses, I feel like they just don't do that same due diligence, and it always makes me feel away. I just don't understand that there's such a great difference when I want to watch someone who looks like me and they don't get none of the glitz and glam. And I feel like sometimes it's even worse for the lesbian porn if it's ebony. Now I'm trying to figure out who the hell I can send an email to because these MFs know better than to have these women up in here looking like that. So a lot of Black women imagine themselves as part of the actresses in pornography. So you want to see yourself in a positive light. So it turns a lot of Black women off and turns a whole masturbatory session off if Black women are not presented fairly and equally in pornographic films. And lastly, Black women place a lot of their arousal in masculine presenting men having sex with one another. So they center their eroticism in a taboo of masculine presenting men, same gender sex, that intentionally queers or turns heteropatriarchy on its head, right? By masculine presenting men having sex. So they favor a lot of gay porn because they construe it as looking real and authentic. But to some gay men, it actually doesn't look authentic and real. So this is important in gender studies because it shows how Black women can locate eroticism in masculine presenting men's sex, but have disgust in masculine presenting women's sex. So final thoughts. Those were all the research findings, and future research goals of mine include examining voodoo BDSM sex practices in the American South, and also more iterations of sex magic between Black women who have sex with other women. And yes, that concludes my presentation.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Jessamy.
Thank you.